every possible tool.
I know.
Sometimes a little too much. It's too much access.
Like you're, who is
All right.
that
Well,
breathing?
hi everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're at the pre-med conference at Davis, and this panel is for the non-traditionals out there. And so we have an amazing panel of non-traditional Met students here from a number of Met schools. And so we're going to first start out with introducing each one of them. My name is Kay, and I'm a second-year medical student at UC Davis. And we'll start with Krista Bell in the end.
Hi, I'm Krista Bell. I am a first-year medical student at Touro University. I graduated from UC Davis in 2006. I was a statistics and biology major. I'm a non-traditional student because I took about 5 years off after graduating from UC Davis to entering into Touro as a first-year med student. To give a little bit of background about myself, when I came to UC Davis, I was undeclared. I didn't know what I was really, what I was going to do. So I took math and science classes at the same time. And it wasn't really until around my junior year at UC Davis that after I did some shadowing with a physician in rural Alabama that I got that wake-up call to pursue medicine. So to kind of establish more of what field I might be interested in going into, I did some research. I volunteered at a student-run clinic called Paul Hom Asian Clinic in Sacramento. So I interpreted for patients and for physicians and medical students. I took vitals, took case histories. At the same time, I was doing a lot of research for prostate cancer. And I was trying to balance taking the MCATs at the same time. Didn't do too well for my first couple of tries. Had to figure out what I was doing wrong, had to reassess what issues I might have that was holding me back from special events that had happened in my past, people that had told me that I didn't have the logical or reasoning skills in order to handle a very hard field such as medicine. So at the same time I was working, I moved from academic research to industry research in the Bay Area. Worked for Intermune for 2 years, worked on a hepatitis C protease inhibitor, and then moved on to Alios Biopharma in 2008 and worked on a hepatitis C polymerase inhibitor, and at the same time helped to establish more of the biology department over there and to get 2 of our candidates into clinical trials, which we just did this past June with a good partnership with Vertex. So during this time, I was also taking the MCATs. I learned to, I found out what my weaknesses were. I had to go back and kind of reaffirm my logic for each question and developed a good study plan for myself. And so now I'm excited to say that I'm a first-year Touro medical student.
Hi, my name is Louise Godoy. I'm a second-year medical student here at UC Davis, and so I'll start off with a little bit of background history about myself to show you guys why I'm on the non-traditional student panel. So I was beginning in high school. I was never a stellar high school student. By the time I was in 10th grade, I had gotten expelled from school and had dropped out at the time. I was working full-time, wasn't considering going back to school until I had like a little wake up call where I realized the sacrifice that my parents had made to bring us to the United States from Mexico. We left our only home that we had in Mexico to come to America, and I felt a sense of guilt because I had let them down. So I decided to go back to high school, and by the time I graduated, I had become a father. So after graduation, really college wasn't something that I had planned on going to. So I just decided to work for a couple of years. And it was through those years of working that it eventually led me to work at a clinic where I was able to work with some great physicians and work with some of the patients that I got the privilege to translate for, since I was the only Spanish speaker. And it was some of those patients who first gave me the motivation and gave me that suggestion that I should become a doctor. It was confirmed with physicians that I was working with that also recommended that I go into medicine. So I was in my mid-20s with 2 children. I was married with my wife, and at that point I decided that I wanted to go back and pursue a career in medicine. The first thing I did was I went to a community college to see if they could kind of guide me along to show me the path, what I should do to get into medical school. And it was with the meeting with one of the counselors that's kind of, it was one of those pivotal moments because he told me that based on my high school background and getting expelled from school in high school that I should consider another career. He handed me pamphlets, that I should go into auto mechanic, auto body. They make a good living. You could support your children with it. So, I decided, what? I want to go into medicine. I'm going to find my own way to medical school, and that's kind of what I did. I kind of took classes out of sequence, but eventually I was able to transfer to UC Davis. I graduated in 2008, but I still didn't feel that sense, that confidence that I could. I didn't have those study skills necessary to succeed in medical school, so I enrolled in a post-bac program here at UC Davis, and then I applied to medical school, and so now here I am. I'm a second-year medical student.
I'm Donovan Jeffcoat. I'm a first-year medical student at Toro. I worked my way through my undergraduate to graduate from Cal State San Bernardino in 2003, and worked for 14 years on television. And in 2005, so 2 years later, I decided to go to medical school and ended up having to go back and retake courses at community colleges and whatnot to actually qualify to be able to get into medical school. I went to Drexel's IMS program last year to kind of field test myself, make sure I could actually do the work at medical school, and got into medical school this year.
My name is Leon Cushenberry. I am a second-year medical student here at UC Davis. I started at UC Davis for undergrad, and I graduated in 2006. I had several clinical experiences that really pointed that I should really go into medicine, in addition to family experiences that confirmed that. But at the end of my undergraduate career, I was a little undecided. I was at a fork in the road. I wasn't confident that I could actually get into medical school or that I had the skills and the study habits to do well in medical school. So I ended up applying to a post-baccalaureate program. I ended up attending UC San Diego, and that was a great experience for me to develop those skills and develop the confidence that I would need to succeed in medical school. And it was a great experience for me to have introspection and reflection on what medicine really would mean in my life and how I could be a part of it and what I could contribute to a medical school. So again, at the end of that experience, I was at another fork in the road and I wasn't confident. So I guess in the sense I was a non-traditional post-baccalaureate student. So I took some time off again and I worked. And I thought more about medicine and how I could actually improve my application. So I did several things. I worked in a hospital. I got more clinical experience. And then by that time, I took my MCAT for the first time after going through some challenges that you may also be experiencing on, the fear and the trepidation that the MCAT can provide. But just really putting myself in the right mindset to take the exam. I actually took it. And then I applied to medical school, and I'm here at UC Davis.
My name is Kiera Ben Dixon, and I'm a second-year medical student at Toro University, which is an osteopathic medical school. I graduated from Seattle University in 2006, and I kind of knew that I wanted to enter medicine since I was young. And my sister broke her leg playing soccer, and I kind of had to follow her through that whole process of surgeries and rehab, and had a lot of family experience with both sets of my grandparents passing away and being around and present throughout that whole process. After I graduated, I was working in a cardiovascular research through the University of Washington doing stem cell research, which I really loved, but kind of missed out on the clinical application and interaction with people. And I also did some global health work during that time. And I then decided to, or I had applied to medical school and did not get in the first time. So I was kind of crushed and needed to kind of reevaluate my life and what my aspirations were and figure out who I was and what the next steps were in that process. I moved across the country to Connecticut and lived with my boyfriend there and worked in a wine bar. Tried out something a little bit different to try to reorganize my life. And while I was there, I also volunteered in hospitals and just kind of hung out and chose a different lifestyle for a while. And I realized through that time and reflection that medicine was where I wanted to be. So I decided to move back to Seattle and took a few post-bac classes to get myself back into academia, and actually continued back the work I was doing through the University of Washington in the Stem Cell Research Lab. And I reapplied and I got in. So I'm now a second-year medical student again at Touro University.
Hi, my name is Geneva White, and I am a first-year medical student at UC Davis. My freshman year of college was actually at a university in New Orleans called Dillard University, and I got a little homesick because I'm from Sacramento, and I came back to Sacramento, and I finished up my general education at community college at Sac City and Cosumnes River College. But it wasn't until I actually volunteered at the medical center, UC Davis Medical Center, in the operating room, that I really, it really hit home that I really wanted to become a physician. And even though I was pre-med before, I don't think I really understood what it meant to become a physician and take on that responsibility. After I finished my general education at Cosumnes and CRC, I took a couple years off. I got married and I worked 2 jobs to save money and help my husband out because he was graduating from UC Davis at the time. And then in fall of 2007, I enrolled in Sac State, and I finished with a bachelor's in biological science. I took a year off and I applied and I worked and to help support myself for the interview process, and I am now a student at UC Davis Medical School.
Great. And my name is Anika Goggin, and I'm a second-year med student. I also took a number of years. I took 6 years off after graduating college before I applied to med school. I was not pre-med at all when I started. I was really excited about research at Cornell, and so I dedicated most of my time to research, thinking I'd go PhD. And then after I graduated, I actually got a Fulbright to go to Bangladesh, and that's really when it planted the seed for me to consider pursuing medicine. And so after that, I actually did a number of jobs. I worked at a winery for 6 months in Napa Valley, and then I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked in the nonprofit sector. I then moved to being a management consultant in health policy, and then I worked in Congress during the healthcare reform process as well. And that's really, after having seen so many angles to the healthcare system, that's really when I felt like medicine, being a doctor, is what I wanted to do. And so, as you can see, I mean, we have a really good, diverse group of panelists who've taken, followed their passion and taken a number of years to get to medical school. So please feel free to ask us questions through Twitter and through the website. And I think the first question we have from the audience is about post-bac programs. What types of post-bac programs are out there, and what are some of the advantages or disadvantages to enrolling in them for medical school?
Okay, well, I'll talk from experience about the UC Davis post-bac in specific, because that's the one that I have most experience with. But the UC system as a whole, each medical school has a post-bac program, and they all run a little bit differently. The one at UC Davis, it's really structured to help you prepare for the MCAT. So there's a summer component where you're going to class from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and it's MCAT, and then you go home and eat, and then MCAT again. So it's like a job, like you're doing it, 24/7 MCAT, and that component is, I believe it's like 10 weeks. After that, you take your MCAT exam sometime in September, first couple weeks of September, and then the actual academic year starts in the end of September, so like the 20th of September, and the year goes up to June. One of the other components that this program has, or that it offered me, was you get educational skills testing. So they have professionals who come in and they help you assess what strategies, what things you can do, that the things that are good, the things that are bad, your weaknesses and strengths. And so just by identifying what you're doing wrong, that's like key, because if you don't know you're doing something wrong, you're going to keep doing it wrong. So they help you with identification of your weaknesses. You can fix those, and at the same time augment the good skills that you have. They help you with time management, how to handle stress, test anxiety. A lot of us, going into the MCAT, that's like a stressful test. Now we're preparing for our boards. Those of us that are second year, and that's like the big brother of the MCAT, who's tougher and he's got muscles. So we're kind of scared about that. But we can use these. I can use those skills that I learned to kind of take that approach and not be afraid of succeeding with the boards.
It really helps with those lifelong skills that you need, not only in medical school, but to become a good physician. And I think that in addition to, I went to UC San Diego's post-bac, and we definitely had journal clubs where we could go over scholarly articles and we could discuss the hypothesis behind it and actually start to think critically into mechanisms that are complex in medicine. Another aspect of that is you get support. And that's something that oftentimes we forget to mention, is that you get support in your post-baccalaureate program because, one, you're in a culture, a little microcosm of people who are thirsty just like you are, trying to improve and are introspective and trying to get to that next step. And so you really have that support. You have the support of your program director, which is very pivotal for me, again, with my confidence. I think for me it was really that issue of, I know that I want to go into medicine, but how do I actually get there, and can I really sustain myself? And during the post-baccalaureate program, it's an intensive environment for you to kind of try those things out, because once you get into medical school, you really want to know things about yourself, because the workload will be different in a sense. And so you want to know, if you know a lot of things about yourself, then you can excel much faster in an easier transition.
Well, did you guys all know what post-bac program you wanted to go to? Did you even have a preference, or how did you even research that information and know which one you wanted to go to?
The first thing I did was I looked at I went on the AAMC website and I just Googled even post-baccalaureate programs that would qualify me with my GPA. So certain ones will have a GPA component. They will have either you had to take the MCAT or different things that they were looking for. Maybe if you were interested in working in an underserved population, those are some of the tenets of a post-baccalaureate program. So I definitely looked at those components of it. And if there's anything.
Yeah, a big factor for me, since I am married and I have two children, was to stay hopefully in the area. So I applied to two programs. I applied to UC Davis and UCSF, and that was the big factor for me.
Cool. Well, we actually have another question on Twitter about dual degrees. So, did you guys ever consider a MD PhD or MD MPH or any type of dual degree when you're applying to med school, given all the experience you've accumulated over the years?
Actually, I'm in Toro's DO MPH program right now, and it is actually one of the things that finalized my decision to go to Toro over going to another school. And I was able to go in and look, what can I do during the summer, either both before the school and in between the first and second year, that was going to benefit me more as a physician later. And so Toro offered a dual degree program that had their MPH portion was in the summer, and then during the regular school year, you would be taking your DO skills, and then the next summer you're finishing off your MPH. Whereas the other school, it was only offering a intensive anatomy course, a single course, rather than a full curriculum of graduate level work to try to push you into it. And it's made the initial transition into medical school a lot easier, because it was work that I was more comfortable with my background in anthropology, because it was more of a social oriented work as opposed to the hard sciences. but it's definitely something that you want to make sure that you're going to be able to handle the workload, the additional workload of having 2 degrees at the same time.
I mean, did you debate about doing it dual versus just waiting till you finish your residency? Like, what made you stick with doing the dual program?
Doing the dual programs, usually you'll, depending upon the school, you either can do it without an extension of the 4 years of medical school or with a single year extension, which means you can get into residency and kind of start getting into medicine and working sooner. If you wait afterwards, it's usually like an 18-month, a 24-month period that you're kind of still in that limbo where you're not really producing medicine. And for me, it was, once I get the medical education, I want to be able to start using it and continuously using it without going out and being kind of setting back out on the sidelines again before I can be functional.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, we have another question. I mean, I know when I was working in government, I was on a pretty basic salary, and so I was barely breaking even, and then all of a sudden you have med school applications or, and then obviously the med school loans are really high. And so with some of you, even with post-bac programs, like how did you guys manage to afford a post-bac program or even med school applications, especially for some of you who have families? Like, was that, how hard was that, or what did you do to make ends meet?
Well, the way that I approached it when I was in the post-bac program and the way I approached applying, because it does get expensive. So during that time that I was applying, I was working as well. And like I mentioned, my wife was working. She's also working at the time. So I was able to manage that okay. But, for people that do have difficulties paying for those kinds of things like the applications, AMCAS does have like a fee assistance waiver. So it's just like an application. I'm not that familiar with it, but I think it's an application that you fill out. You submit like your income taxes or something like that, and they waive your application fees. And once you get that waiver, the schools also waive their secondary application fees, which, I mean, if you apply to like 20 schools and they're like $90 a piece, it adds up pretty quickly. So that's an option, for people that have difficulties with that.
Yeah. What about the other people who did post-bac programs? Was that tough to afford them?
You have to, for me, I was using part of the loans for the post-bac program to fund the medical school application process, but it meant you had a significantly smaller pool of money you had to actually manage. Other than that is really, if you can't work, you really have to make sure you either have somebody who's able to help you or have really good credit.
Okay, well, and then now, how about the other students who didn't get post-bac, who weren't in post-bac programs? Like, where did you get all your advice, and how did you navigate the whole medical school process for you guys?
For me, I went to Sac State, and there was actually a program at Sac State called Science Educational Equity, and that program actually is for students that are want to go into the health professions or from underserved backgrounds or disadvantaged backgrounds. And so that program provided me with scholarships and pre-med advising, and just to kind of figure out where I was going along those lines. And they actually helped me with filling out my application for the fee assistance program that AMCAS provides. Like you were saying, they waive your secondaries. Some schools you still have to pay, but I applied to 23 schools and I sent in like 21 secondaries, and so it would have been a lot of money for me. But I also worked at that time in retail to try to raise money to go on just the interviews. And then once you get the interviews, then you can make the decision as to whether or not you're going to spend the money to fly out on the East Coast, or if there's some schools that have programs where you can stay with a medical student to cut down the costs on hotel fees and things like that. So when it does come down to the interviews, the schools will work with you, and you can contact the schools and ask them if they have programs like that to help cut down the cost. Because the schools, they understand that it is expensive, and once they give you the interview, they do want you to come and interview with them. So definitely, I advise you to reach out to the schools and ask them that.
Yeah, and I actually have one thing to add. I am not married, and I don't have any children, and it's really expensive, and I can't imagine having gone through that with having to support a family. I really commend everybody who has a family that goes through this process. But you just have to keep in mind that I just took out loans actually to pay for everything, and it's really, really expensive. But when I finally found out that I got into medical school, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually got in, so now I need to have a vacation. So I had spent all of my savings and everything on applications, and I went and talked with my financial planner, and he said, you know what, you should just take out another loan for $8,000 because at the end of the day it just doesn't matter, and you're gonna be able to pay it off. And you just have to remember that you are making an investment by entering this profession, and it's just important to keep that in mind, because I don't even want to tell you the number that I have to pay back at the end of this long journey. But just keep in mind that you don't want to sell yourself short because of financial restrictions, and there are a lot of programs out there that can help you to make your dreams come true.
I guess to add to that, I'm pretty sure while you're sitting here that MCAT is a really big hurdle to get through to get your foot in the door for medical school. And I was an undergraduate here at UC Davis, and I was undeclared for quite some time before making the decision to enter into medical school. And I'm the first one in my family to become a doctor, and I really had no guidance. So I pretty much asked friends who had already established themselves as pre-med, talked to my counselor here, went to the pre-health student center, and just through emails and talking to people, one of the nice things about UC Davis, and I'm hoping they still have it because I saw Linda Scott's email not too long ago, that there's a scholarship sponsored by the UC Davis Medical School, and if you get the scholarship and it's to help out people who are underserved, or if you have some reason why you can't afford to take an MCAT prep program, so I got the scholarship, and I got the Princeton Review to help me review for the MCAT pretty much for free. And at the same time, you take classes along with the post-bacs here at UC Davis, and you kind of talk to them, you get the experience, what it's like to be a medical student, because you actually get to sit in with the classes. I remember when I was taking the tour around the UC Davis Medical Center, they actually have a really cool model that you can do an angioplasty on without having to actually perform it on a human being. But to finance the rest of my medical school journey, I pretty much worked. I took out loans just like Kiera, and you kind of have to step back and look at the big picture, because yes, that's a lot of zeros trailing that loan that you just got, but the investment, it is worth it. And like Kiera is saying, there's a lot of good programs after you graduate, such as helping out with the underserved communities, that they'll work with you to help pay back your loans.
Great. So what did you guys do about letters of recommendation? I mean, I know after 6 years of working and 4 years of undergrad, I mean, I had a number of people at least that I could ask, and I would actually struggle a lot to figure out who to ask. And so, I mean, how did you figure out who to ask, and, you know, the strategy around what portfolio of recommendations you guys had?
Well, I went first when I was doing volunteer work at a hospital, so I was actually starting to approach the physicians. And I ended up with, I think, 3 or 4 physician letters, and then I went in to found some of my undergraduate people that I worked with to get some of my basic sciences letters. And I even ended up getting letters from the nursing staff from the surgical unit I was in, so that I was able to put together a wide variety of letters rather than just, okay, this is my physics instructor, my chemistry instructor, so that it was able to show that among all these different people, I'm getting praise from all of them. And that, I think, helped quite a bit.
The way that I approached it, like I mentioned during the introduction, when I decided to go into medicine, I was working at a clinic with some really good doctors that were my mentors at the time. So the one doctor in particular that first recommended to me, that Luis, you should go into medical school. Don't sell yourself short. You can do it. What better letter of recommendation can you get than from that one person who kind of pushed you into doing it? The one person who believed that you could do it. So I asked him for the letter, and he agreed, and he actually said, that his heart would have been broken if I wouldn't have asked him for a letter. So, ask from people who can really speak as to, who you are, the type of person you are. Get to know your professors. I got to know a couple of professors here at UC Davis that were really, really, really good teachers, always approachable. Believe it or not, even in a classroom of 400 students, there are some professors around here who will know you by name. They'll know their students by name, and don't be afraid to go up there and go to office hours. Get to know them. Get to know what they do outside of school. Let them get to know what you do out of school, because that way they can, when they write that letter, they can talk about you as a whole and not just the person who got an A in my class. Because I guarantee you that letter that he writes for that person who got the A in the class, he probably has 10 or 15 of them where it's just cut and paste. So get to know the professors.
It's evidence, and evidence is key. It's very important to, if you have a meaningful activity. I remember I enjoyed TAing, I enjoyed teaching, I loved microbiology, and I got to know a professor at UC San Diego who got to know me on that level of about my compassion and my family history and why I really wanted to go into medicine. So I felt that he could really write me a strong letter of recommendation, and it also tied into something I enjoyed doing. So I approached it in that way. He knew that I had an interest in medicine, so I did bring it up to him. And that's another thing, is kind of like, how do you bring it up to someone without saying, a lot of times we can feel shy or timid to say, I just want a letter of recommendation. But it's very important that you get to know someone, and then in your conversation, you do let them know that you're interested in medicine, and then so that they know by that time it comes to you to ask for that letter of recommendation. It's, as Louise would say, it's like, I would be glad to write you a strong letter of recommendation.
Did anybody have to go back to a professor that they hadn't talked to for 5 or 6 years and ask for a recommendation, or was it all pretty recent?
No. Mine was pretty recent, and even like, for instance, the physicians that I had worked with, I always stayed and maintained contact with them. And I had them write me a letter before, which was several years before I even applied. So when the time came to apply, I contacted them about updating the letter, which my letter writers gladly did.
So I did a research program at Brown University, and obviously that was my junior year. So by the time I actually applied to medical school, there had been many years difference. And so I actually approached the researcher that I was working with to write me a letter of recommendation. But again, when I was working with him, we had those conversations. So it was kind of like the platform was set for me to ask for that letter of recommendation. But again, there was that, oh my gosh, do I go to him and ask? Is he even going to remember me? And a key thing to that, I wish I had actually done more of, is to stay in contact so that you can have that linear relationship with the person.
Yeah, I even had a professor that fortunately I had been in touch with, just every year, just writing a simple email, to that person, just saying, hey, just wanted to let you know that, I moved to this new job, and I'm really excited. And I think it's never too late to start. So even if it's a faculty member you really click with freshman year that you hadn't talked to for 3 or 4 years, if you think they could really write a good recommendation letter for you, then, and you might be applying in a year or two, you should start contacting them now. The last thing you want to do is have to contact them and be like, I need a letter of recommendation in a month, and let's get to know you type thing. I mean, now is a great time to just start building those relationships or rebuilding those relationships, so that when it's time to contact them for a letter, they already know you and they already know your motivations then for going to medical school, and they already know that you've been working hard for the last couple of years to do that. And so I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
I just wanted to add that for your letter of recommendation, this is the great thing about being a non-traditional student is that you have a scope of people that are witnesses to what you've been doing all this whole time. Like for example, I had letters. I had 6 letters when I was applying to medical school, and 3 or 4 of them were from my professors. And these are not professors that could just say, "Oh, I was a good student in their class," but they saw me as somebody who was outreaching to my community. I was somebody who kept in contact with them, whether I did research or maybe I was just having a bad day, because you do have some of those professors that do care. I also had a letter from a physician from the clinic that I was volunteering at. So now I have a letter about, okay, so this person can handle the rigorous curriculum of medical school. Now you have a physician who's attesting to the fact that you have the bedside manners to be that physician. And then at the same time, I got 2 letters from my supervisors that I worked out, whether it was industry or academia, and now I can actually apply that knowledge in the field. So don't cut yourself short as being a non-traditional student, because you actually have a very good advantage and you have a really good range of people vouching for you when you do apply.
Great. Well, we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to give the opportunity for anybody to give their final thoughts and advice to the audience today.
Just to close out that topic on letters of recommendation, just one suggestion that I used when I was asking for letters, because like was said, it's kind of awkward sometimes to go in and ask for letters. One strategy that I used was I prepared a packet ahead of time with pretty much a resume, a personal statement, any accomplishments I had, anything that I felt that the letter writer could use to kind of frame me in a certain light in his letter. I provided that to them, and I did that ahead of time. So when I went to their office, I had it in my backpack already. So when I asked them and when they agreed, I'm like, oh well, I just happen to have this packet. And the other thing is, I'm sure you guys have gone to your professor's office and they got, there's stacks of charts everywhere and papers everywhere. I used like a folder that was like sky blue, something that wasn't going to get lost in the shuffle somewhere, just so that, they would remember, like the sky blue chart, I got to write this letter. And then what I did was, you try to give them plenty of time to give you that strong letter. And you don't want to be pressuring them. You don't want it to be rushed last minute. So what I would do is I gave them the letter, maybe like 3 months ahead of time. Asked them, if they could write it, providing them the material. And then halfway through that time, I would either email them, call them, or visit them and just remind them like, hey, I thank you so much for writing this letter, and I really appreciate it. And by doing it that way, you're not like saying like, have you written my letter yet? Or, if they had forgotten, that's going to kind of refresh it in their mind again. So like halfway between, I would always call to thank them or, bring some chocolates or something so they could remember to write you that strong letter.
The best advice that I can give to any student is to take time to learn what works for you, to learn your weaknesses, to learn your strengths, because in medical school, the volume of material and things go so fast that it can be more difficult if you don't really know the type of student you are and the way you learn and what your streams are. That's very, very important. I think that's even over, taking physiology or a science course is really to learn who you are, because you will excel when you're actually met with the challenge if you know who you are.
And as non-traditionals out there, I would say take this application process as an opportunity to shine. You guys have had the 1, 2, or maybe 10 years to do something really cool. And other people, it's hard to do something really cool in college when you're still swamped with classes and extracurriculars. So make sure that you take advantage of that and that you really make that part of you shine in the application process, because you have that. And I think also to get really good mentors. I advise and mentor a number of students who are trying to get into medical school, and sometimes I am shocked that the advice they get is not really the best advice, even sometimes from college counselors. And so, one of my students, they were recommended to submit their application as, pretty late in the process so they can work on it, when you really want to be very early in your application process. So just get as much advice as you can from as many reliable sources as possible, and that could be, if you have trouble finding them, maybe it's your doctor or your doctor's office who look for somebody who's younger, who's been through that process more recently, and say, hey, I'm trying to apply to med school. What advice do you have? Or bounce ideas off of them. There's doctors all over the place and med students all around, and so I would try to get the most recent advice from as many people as possible, because getting the right advice is literally half the battle, and the rest is just give it your best shot and be passionate about what you do. So we wanted to thank you all for joining us today, and we wish you the best of luck, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the National Pre-Med AMSA Conference. So thank you very much.